The Cabal of Tsakata, Episode 2, Mayar 24th, 513. Today we left the city of Bubesh with a large collection of supplies for the others at the excavation site. The sun was very hot today, especially because there weren't any clouds in the sky. To my great dismay, when I tried to engage in Obassian's small talk, he gave me a hard look and expressed as kindly as he could that he was in no mood to have small talk with me. Kamil and the others were busy watching the horizon, and so much of my day was spent in silent observation. The rolling dunes stretched farther than I could see, and despite the vast open emptiness, I felt a sense of peace come over me. I would have never dreamed of such a sight back in Ocean Dare. Kamil and the other native Naquerians were tempered by the desert heat, by the sandy winds, and by the strength of the country itself. I was lucky to be in their company. Would I be shaped by Naquer, too? As we moved to the northeast, we left the dunes behind, and we started to travel through the lusher grassy plains. Shepherds led their flocks of sheep in the distance, and I also saw a lone traveler from time to time as well. Samira told me that in general, temples to Tsakata were far from the normal flow of South Shiadamite civilization. The temple at Ornak was certainly far from Bubesh. According to Kamil, we would arrive at the site in 2 days' time. To my surprise, Obasi came to talk to me after we made camp. He apologized for his dour demeanor upon our first meeting, and revealed that someone he cared for was recently killed by marauders. Obasi told me the marauders were common in Naquer, which is why it was so important to follow Kamil's directions. Someone named Norris didn't, and now he was dead. As a matter of fact, I was brought to Naquer to replace Norris. Obasi explained that the temple we were headed to was at a site called Ornak. According to the discovered texts, the small village of Ornak was a shepherd's village that served as a front for the temple itself. The people of Ornak manufactured wool from their sheep, and they sold the wool to passing caravans. It was the last place in all of South Shiadam anyone would think to find a den of debauchery. I can't wait to see Ornak for myself. Mayar 26th, 513. We finally arrived at the site of the former village of Ornak today. Various rocky outcropping cliff faces and other such rock formations rose up from the land like stone fingers of a submerged god. A large camp of laborers were set up in the remains of the village. Old houses still stood, and a large and ancient well was in the middle of the settlement. There were several guards at the front of the village, and Kamil waved at them. The guards bowed their heads at Kamil. Obasi explained that the security guards were actually Naquerian military, who were sent to support Dr. Reaver as she supported the Naquerian government. The village was situated beside a large curved collection of cliffs and rocks. If I had not known the existence of a temple here somewhere, I would have assumed it was just a shepherd's village. Kamil led me to one of the tents, and inside I met a pair of women. The first was an older woman, perhaps in her late 30s. She had short brown hair, a pair of light blue eyes, and a very welcoming smile. Her skin tone was light brown, although not as dark as the Naquerians, but darker than mine. The woman was none other than Dr. Reaver, the head of the archaeological survey. The other woman in the tent was closer to my age, if not the same age. She had light skin, although it was redder due to the constant exposure to the sun. She wore a headscarf, but tufts of her blonde hair peeked out of the scarf. She settled her deep blue eyes on me for a moment before averting them. The other woman crisply introduced herself as Carol Yearns, and like Obasi, they were doctoral students who studied at the same university as Dr. Reaver. Carol and Obasi left to help with the supplies, and Dr. Reaver offered to show me to the temple. We left the tent and moved through the rocky outcropping. As we walked toward it, I caught a peripheral glance over the ruins of Ornac. Back in the past, there would have been over a dozen families here, living their lives, hiding and protecting the Cabal of Tsakata from the outside world. Were they also members of the religious faith, or perhaps hired to serve as their front? Dr. Reaver and I walked on the well-worn path between the rocky corridor, between two cliffs. We came to a rock wall dead end that I soon discovered was actually a pair of carefully constructed doors, made to look like the stone walls surrounding them. Dr. Reaver gleefully pushed the doors open and led me on a hidden path. Soon we came upon a miniature canyon where the actual temple was located. A massive set of double doors stood open, leading into the temple itself. Above the doorway, a statue of a four-armed goddess stood, with two arms held out, as if to welcome me. The other two arms were on her hips, as if suggesting that the long-forgotten goddess was waiting for me for quite some time. The statue was naked, with a bare chest, and both sets of genitals visible. Columns were carved into the rock on either side of the double entryway. It was dark inside the temple, so we had to use torches to light our way. The width of the corridor was large enough to accommodate 4 people walking side by side, comfortably. Splendid, well-preserved murals covered the walls and the ceilings. Upon the ceiling was the imagery of beautiful stars, as if seen on a clear night. The wall murals on both sides of the hallway showed crowds of people walking in long lines. The people on the walls all had different faces, body types, eye shapes, and other such things. Dr. Reaver explained to me that this temple was especially famous for their orgies, and it was one of many such facilities that catered to the interested citizens. According to the documented texts, many of the attendees of such events claimed to have audiences with Tsakata herself. The hallway led to a chamber with a huge stone column in the center. Dr. Reaver told me that a beautiful painting used to hang on the column, and it was on display at the museum. A stone altar was at the base of the massive column, just under where the painting used to be. Unlike the hallway, there weren't any murals on the walls of this chamber. 3 additional corridors extended from the chamber, one going to the left, one to the right, and one opposite of the hallway that I and Dr. Reaver entered from. The corridor going to the left and right both led to the orgy rooms, where highly coveted and anticipated sex rituals took place. Dr. Reaver showed me one of the rooms. The walls of the room were adorned with graphic and detailed paintings of many people engaging in sexual activities. Apparently, both rooms were of equal size, and had the same sorts of imagery in both. The last corridor led to a hallway that contained several storage rooms, pantries, and smaller living chambers for the clerics. In the central room, Dr. Reaver had set up several wooden tables where various scrolls, books, and artifacts were piled. After the tour was complete, Dr. Reaver and I discussed what my specialty was, which was storytelling through ancient art. I told her I was fascinated with how people conveyed events, history, and legends in artistic expression. Aside from written text, art is another method that a civilization can remember the past, as the truth of such times can easily be lost. I showed Dr. Reaver my sketchbook related to the artifacts and art I had seen in the National Naquerian Museum. It certainly boosted my ego to see the good doctor smile and appreciate my work. She told me she had been the one to find many of the Tagunite artifacts, as well as the Temple of Tsakata at Ornac. The painting of the Tagunite zealot stabbing the effigy of Tsakata was actually found in a sealed tomb of a famous Naquerian historical figure, a man named Shali Shebaba. Shali Shebaba had been a famous hunter, an enemy of Tsakata in ancient times, as well as a champion and saint for the Order of Tagun. His tomb had been lost to time, and it was Dr. Reaver who had found it. By finding the tomb of Shali Shebaba, it gave the doctor hints and leads to discover this very temple. Before the discovery of the tomb, Tsakata had been mostly forgotten by the Naquerians, and only seen as a very obscure debauchery demoness of sorts. Dr. Reaver invited me back to the main tent and shared tea with me. As we talked, she told me that her father, the famous Dr. Alistair Reaver, had been the one to inspire her to pursue archaeology. In my studies, I had heard of her father, the first Dr. Reaver. He had come to Naquer, but he had never returned. She explained to me that she knew of the Cabal's existence long before the discovery, though she never mentioned how she knew. There was no official records or texts about the Order of Tsakata in modern Naquer, but Dr. Reaver knew something must have existed somewhere. That's why finding the tomb of Shali Shebaba was key. There is a great passion in Dr. Reaver's eyes, and it is quite infectious. I am so happy that I get to be here, and that I get to be a part of this unfolding of history. Dr. Reaver came to this country 5 years ago, and in that time she made one amazing discovery after another. The tomb of Shali Shebaba was in the southwestern corner of the country. Interestingly, Shali Shebaba had come from the far western dunes of Saushiadam. Legend states that Shali Shebaba had a premonition from Tagun, that one day a great evil would invade the country from that direction. The hero Shali Shebaba wanted to be close to where the evil would arrive in Saushiadam, so he may rise up from the dead to defend his people again. Dr. Reaver found that legend fascinating, but it had nothing to do with Tsakata. And as far as she knew, the evil foretold never came to the country. She told me casually that she met Hamal when she first came to Naquer, on her first archaeological survey. Since that time, they had forged a strong friendship with one another by finding ancient ruins, securing treasures for Naquer, and defending against marauders. When I asked about the marauders, Dr. Reaver became melancholy. I revealed that I had been told about Norris, and the sadness in her eyes grew more potent. Naturally, I apologized, but some of her warmth returned. She told me that the marauders consisted of a fellowship of radical Tagunite faithful, who not only saw archaeology as grave robbing, but also strongly opposed to the Cabal of Tsakata. To them, Dr. Reaver's exploits were attempts to undermine Naquerian society with ancient debauchery. Norris, the person I had come to replace, was also a student at her university. He was a treasured friend of Obasi and Carol. Obasi and Norris were language experts and knew the ancient Saushiadamite script well. Carol specialized in ancient religious practices and other such things. She focused her own research in understanding the ancient rites of the Cabal of Tsakata. One day, Norris snuck out of the secured camp, and he was attacked by marauders while he was in a nearby field. Dr. Reaver expressed how important it was to follow Hamal's guidance related to security and safety. As we finished our tea, Dr. Reaver gave me a tremendous undertaking. She marveled at how detailed my sketchbook was, and she tasked me with cataloging all of the art found within the temple. By taking down every subtle detail, we might be able to find out more clues and overlooked secrets. She gave me the rest of the day to settle in, but tomorrow I will begin my duty. I can't wait.